Have you looked at the news lately? Between the wild swings in the stock market and these massive political shifts, it's incredibly easy to feel like the world is just pure, unadulterated chaos. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to decode exactly why it feels that way, and we're going to expose a really fascinating psychological glitch that makes us fundamentally misunderstand that chaos. So let me ask you right off the bat, how much control do you actually have over the outcomes in your life? We all love to think we're the captains of our own ships, expertly steering through the storms. But cognitive science has a much more humbling reality check for us.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the illusion of control. Second, the biases behind it all. Third, control in presidential elections. Fourth, volatility in financial markets. And finally, the value of humility.
All right, let's jump straight into part one, the illusion of control, a glitch in the human mind. You see, humans aren't just purely rational calculators. We suffer from something called the illusion of control. This is a cognitive glitch where we drastically overestimate our ability to influence events that are actually determined entirely by chance or by massive external factors. It's literally our subjective perception overriding objective reality.
To show you how deep this bias actually runs, let's look at a classic 1970s experiment by psychologist Ellen Langer. People were given a simple game of dice. The ones who got to pick their own numbers and physically throw the dice themselves genuinely believed they had a higher chance of winning. Let that sink in for a second. Just the physical act of throwing the dice tricked their brains into thinking they could control a completely random bounce. Crazy, right? Okay, moving on to part two, the biases behind it all, deconstructing the illusion. Now, this illusion of control doesn't just act alone. It basically operates under an umbrella of interconnected mental shortcuts. Notice how these all team up to trick us? Confirmation bias makes us seek out proof that we're in charge. The availability heuristic makes us overvalue our past vivid wins. And hindsight bias is that little voice telling us we knew it all along. Throw in our innate tendency to take credit for all of our successes while blaming the universe for our failures, and our brains are basically hardwired to feel invincible. But hey, before we judge our own brains too harshly, we've got to remember this illusion was actually a massive evolutionary cheat code. Believing you have control reduces anxiety. For our ancient ancestors, falsely believing that a specific rain dance or a hunting ritual controlled the outcome kept them proactive. It kept them trying, instead of just giving up and becoming saber-toothed tiger snacks. So really, it's a prehistoric survival mechanism running on modern hardware. Let's scale this up to the macro level. Part 3. Control in presidential elections, the democratic ecosystem. When we apply this prehistoric glitch to modern politics, the results are, well, they're wild. Pretty much every stakeholder gets trapped. Voters imbue one single statistically probabilistic ballot with this massive deterministic power. Campaigns chase this ephemeral narrative control, totally convinced that one ad blitz is going to sway millions. And pollsters, they fall right into hindsight bias, treating temporary snapshot data of the public mood as if it's a definitive crystal ball prediction of the future. And the media inadvertently supercharges this whole illusion by framing incredibly complex societal shifts as a simple horse race, obsessing over who is up, who is down, and daily tactical maneuvers. They shrink a vastly unpredictable ecosystem into a manageable, controllable game. It gives us the comforting but entirely false feeling that if we just refresh our feeds enough times, we can accurately predict the finish line. Which brings us to our next arena. Part 4, Volatility in Financial Markets, the Chaos of Commerce. This exact same illusion builds the absolute perfect recipe for financial chaos, and it permeates every single level. You've got individual investors totally convinced they can perfectly time the market. You have herd behavior causing massive speculative frenzies based on vivid news events. Even billion-dollar algorithmic trading models overreact to flawed assumptions. And right at the top, you have policymakers trying to tightly steer inflation, only to accidentally trigger enormous shockwaves in a deeply interconnected global system. And if you look at history, it shows us exactly how this collective delusion repeats itself on a loop. The 1920 stock market crash, the dot-com bubble in the 90s, the 2008 housing crisis, they all follow the exact same psychological arc. Investors become absolutely convinced their predictive models are flawless, so they just keep pouring money into appreciating assets right up until reality steps in and violently shatters the illusion. The prominent central banker Alan Greenspan actually coined a famous phrase for this back in the late 90s, irrational exuberance. I think it perfectly captures the absolute danger of this illusion, the widespread, unchecked arrogance of believing that massive, fundamentally chaotic market forces are actually tamed and predictable. So where does all this leave us? Part 5, the value of humility, navigating the unpredictable. We are basically left with this beautiful, fundamental tension right at the core of the human experience. On one side, we have our ancient evolutionary desperation to be the masters of our own fate. On the other side is the stark reality of a staggeringly complex universe governed by massive causal networks and sheer probability. Bridging that gap, that is the ultimate challenge.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway for us in this explainer? Well, recognizing the illusion of control absolutely doesn't mean just throwing our hands up and surrendering to fate. It actually means fighting smarter. We need to stop stressing over predicting the unpredictable. Embrace the ambiguity instead. By cultivating profound intellectual humility, whether you're voting, investing, or just planning your week, you can build strategies that survive uncertainty, rather than relying on some imaginary crystal ball.
I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If absolute predictability in complex systems is truly impossible, is the illusion of control just our ultimate coping mechanism for surviving a chaotic universe? Does letting go of that illusion make us weaker, or does it finally free us to see the world as it really is? Thanks for exploring this with me. Keep questioning your biases, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.